Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. Today, we're here to talk about the Nintendo Switch. You might see it in the title here. The idea that the Nintendo Switch is, in many ways, the console of dreams. An idea that I've kind of had kicking around in my head for the last few weeks that I find very, very fascinating. We're here to talk about Nintendo Switch's legacy, the games that have been on it, and the way in which it has been answering so many fan dreams. And we're also pulling in, of course, responses from our community, things that were dreams to them that came real over the course of this last generation, and talking about, of course, ourselves. You know, I've got some dreams, you've got some dreams, maybe, just potentially, the Switch answered a few of them. Abram, what should these people do? I think subscribe might be, the first step.
I think that's a good first step. I think joining the Discord that's linked to the top of the description would be a nice step to follow up with. Maybe you could ring the bell. Maybe you could hit subscribe, because if this is a video about dreams, you should answer ours and get us to 80 subscribers. What are we trying to crack right now?
We're fluctuating around there. It's not good. It's fine.
No, it's not. It's not great, but you know what? You got to start somewhere. I mean, and what we did.
We're fluctuating around 82 right now.
Fantastic. Then why don't you guess 83? Okay. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want. Be the change I want to see in the world, and subscribe to the channel.
That's a great point. Aaron, what do you think about this concept? At face value, I messaged in the Discord I think about a week ago, asking about this, and we kind of just used it as a discussion topic. But then we're actually using it as a video discussion topic now. What was your thought then, and what is your thoughts now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really compelling idea because, as I was saying to you before, and I think is an important part of the conversation, at least to begin with, is that this notion of the Switch being, as you're saying, the console, quote-unquote, the console of dreams, is that it's only that because we are left longing for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important component of the conversation, and sort of the part B of this conversation, which is sort of Nintendo's next system, whether it's coming next year, whether it's coming a couple of years down the line, will we be in a similar kind of groove where it feels like Nintendo's development and creative efforts are aligned with what fans are looking for?
Yeah.
Because there is, there's no doubt that there was a period of time when that wasn't the case.
Yes. I would say for most of our cognizant lives, it was that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because I think it's really easy to point to Wii U and 3DS, and it's very easy to point to a lot of overt and often batched on examples, sort of the Scott the Woz canon. I feel like as by saying that, people know what games I'm talking about. But the interesting thing about this, and what I've been sort of mulling over the last couple of days, is I don't even really feel like those changes in the Wii U era, or those releases in the Wii U era, were a result of just the Wii U era. A lot of this stuff was sort of seated in the Wii era. I mean,
yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Wii era that made Zelda more linear in Skyward Sword, and did the same to Mario, and changed how Mario Party played, and didn't deliver a Star Fox title or an F-Zero title, or it was the first to make Paper Mario not like the Thousand Year Door, right? Or I guess like the N64 version, maybe the better touchstone in that era of time.
Yeah.
But I think it was really a compounding effect that as the Wii sort of developed its own identity, the Wii U aping that identity, and the 3DS sort of following in tow in part, kind of did create this malaise for a while of feeling like an idea that we talk about sometimes of Nintendo not listening to the community, and it definitely felt like the case for a while.
Yeah. That is the change that, now that I've thought about this a little bit more, and I don't know how necessarily 100% true this is, but I think a case could certainly be made that this change away from Wii and Wii U era, DS and 3DS era design philosophies that were certainly popular initially, but quickly died off in terms of their popularity, and returning to what are fans asking for, is, I think, a solid reason why the Switch has succeeded to the immense degree that it has. It is now Nintendo's highest selling system, home console system, handheld system, still beaten, I believe, by the DS. But why the Switch is as successful as it is, and why its games across the board are reviewed higher on average than most systems that they've had in the past. And why I think that I like the Switch as much as I do, and why I'm so passionate about it is it does feel like they're making games that, for as much of my life as I can remember, they're never actually going to do this games. And that's really what we're talking about here, is the list of games that I think I was up at like 1 a.m. when I first came up with this idea, and I was sitting there and I was going through the Switch's first party library. I'm like, which series have had questions answered and dreams fulfilled, and the things that I remember listening to people wanting back a decade ago, which things are now just a part of our reality? And it's interesting to think about where will they go from here, that maybe we'll talk about a little bit at the end. But are there any of these games or just general thoughts that you want to start with? You want to start with a community submission, or how are we going to go about this?
I want to segue into community submission, because I think there's one other overarching thing I want to say as we're kind of transitioning into the particulars, as you're saying, of the games that sort of define this trend. And it is this idea of a return, I think, is important. Because as we're going to get into, a lot of what makes the Switch's library special is a return to what we wanted a while ago. And in some ways, that is a very literal sense. That is a Mario Party Superstars. But in other ways, it's a little bit more of a creative and thematic return to the idea of a sandbox Mario, to the idea of 2D Metroid, to all of these things. 2D Metroid straddles that line a little bit more, because Dread is literally, in some ways, what people wanted. But I think it's always a tricky thing to suppose that Nintendo is or isn't listening to the community. And I think that it's important to note, we're going to get into this, one of the community submissions I thought was quite provocative, this idea that Nintendo fans want to be surprised and delighted. And that's 100% true. I mean, that's part of the big reason why I look at the Wii U era in large part, and the Wii era quite fondly, because I think that the idea of the blue ocean customer and designing games around a different type of audience is really exciting. However, what we're really seeing with the Switch and this idea of a return is also, I think, a return to a more traditional games customer. And that is, I think, at the core of a lot of what we're going to talk about today. This idea that Nintendo's games are falling back in line a little bit more with like maybe a GameCube era sensibility, because Nintendo is no longer shooting for a more casual audience. Now, they continue to, in very overt ways, a lot of their initiatives, from Ring Fit Adventure to Labo to Nintendo Switch Sports, and you can even argue some other pieces of software too. But there's a much greater degree of hardcore titles that are uncompromised on Switch. As I was saying, 3D Zelda, 3D Mario, Metroid Prime 3, these are games that had design concessions made for a casual audience. And I don't think that's the case in the vast majority of Switch games, with like Pikmin 4 and some other things being exceptions. But I think it'd just be exciting to sort of look at these games we're about to talk about, not only through the lens of sort of returning to something, answering a dream, but also just maybe speaking to a customer that Nintendo wasn't prioritizing in their design for a while.
Oh, absolutely true. Now, you referenced a specific response.
Yes.
Do you... who was it? You're so vague. I have no idea where to jump to.
It is a specific response. It's one that I almost wanted to just respond to. If I was like, Abram, hold...
There's literally an opportunity for you to do that.
There's literally an opportunity for me to do it where the other person can't defend themselves yet.
Oh, I see. Okay, this is going to be somewhat contentious.
No, it's really not. It's me being a goofball. But this comes from our friend Velt Falsetto. And
that's Adam Hurd, I believe.
Adam Hurd. Okay, I didn't realize that. I know Adam.
I believe so. Yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah, Adam has a long submission. I'm just going to read part 2 of this submission.
Okay.
You act like Nintendo fans don't want weird and expectation-defying titles. That's all they've been doing this gen, too. Sure, Zelda is open world now, but Tears of the Kingdom is a fucking weird game outside of that, and look at the next Mario game, Mario Wonder, which is just madness incarnate. I think Nintendo are going in the right way with their creativity at the moment. Could it be weirder? Sure, but Nintendo are still giving us surreal. My fucking Discord's cutting off. I hate Discord. It's broken on the phone. So give me a surreal.
You want me to finish that?
This is giving us surreal. They just haven't dropped the next Tingle game yet, and as much as I'd love them to, I don't think it's going to happen, sadly. I think they're at a good level of weirdness for most of the population, though, even if for me personally, I like it a little weirder. Adam, that's a very provocative thing, and I apologize that the demons at Discord were making it difficult for me to read. It's that little cow. It's that little cow-looking guy. The blue cow, Discord cow.
Yeah, he's got it's like a Wumpus or something.
Wumpus, that is fucking Wumpus.
Yeah.
But Wumpus can't stop us from talking about this, Tucker. What do you think about what Adam has to say here?
I think it's interesting because that level of madness or weirdness that he's talking about in Tears of the Kingdom, including ostensibly nuts and bolts elements, and Mario Wonder being very, like, literally strange. Like, they're like, oh, things are fucking wiggling and doing weird shit. These are elements I think that have never left design level Nintendo weirdness. When we're talking about the weirdness or unexpected nature of things in the Wii and Wii U 3DS DS era, it's more so no one ever thought of that before, so that is why it feels so different from what came before. Motion controlled Zelda, motion controls had ostensibly not existed before the Wii, so we're going to go in that direction, and so many of our games are going to incorporate that. Gamepad offering different methods of control, that is going to be something totally unique to the games industry, and still to this point, there's nothing like the gamepad, and probably never will be. But with the Switch, it comes to creativity, design decisions on a placed into relatively traditionally designed video games. Things like Tears of the Kingdom being strange, in being a direct sequel, and reutilizing an open world and placing on top of it these new sets of mechanics, is what most games, especially Nintendo games, do, is using that same design structure but placing it into a new context. We talk about GameCube era Nintendo games. Sunshine and Wind Waker are not that structurally different from their 64 counterparts. They're just conceptually weirder. It's when Zelda is now cartoony and on the sea, and Mario is also on the sea, and so there's a lot of water going on in that generation. But structurally, they're not offering a huge shakeup, unlike the Wii generation, when 3D Mario is going to go linear for the first time, and Skyward Sword is also going to be more linear, but also more focused on motion controls and gimmicks. Switch era stuff is not as conceptually or like fundamentally weird as Nintendo has been, but I guess I'm responding to you kind of. I realize I'm not really talking about the dream aspect, but I kind of had this idea like stuck in my mind of like comparing it to Wii and Wii U era stuff.
I think
the Switch's weirdness is more in, as I'm saying, the weird ideas being placed into traditionally designed games, as opposed to weirdly designing games from their base core level.
No, I mean, I think you're exactly right, and so that's the interesting thing about what Adam is saying, and I think it goes back to what I was saying also before of this notion of designing for a different audience.
Yeah.
What's so interesting with the GameCube is that you're totally right. A lot of the GameCube's identity is fairly traditional. I mean, it is the most powerful system of its generation. There are hardware quirks like the handle and the mini CD, but it is, for all intents and purposes, probably the most
normal console Nintendo's ever made.
Exactly. And so what they said then is they said, well, we're making games for and this is also arguably the most hardcore system ever. You look at them locking down a remake of Metal Gear and buying exclusivity to Resident Evil 4 for a while, and the Capcom 5 and Geist and all of this weird shit and Eternal Darkness.
Yeah.
What Nintendo did with so many of the sequels on GameCube, which is why I love GameCube so much and why I contend it's probably my favorite Nintendo system, is that they said, we made a lot of really strong frameworks. Now, what if we built on top of them in creative and provocative ways?
Yeah.
And then we move forward a little bit, and the Nintendo weirdness and the sort of expectation rejection in large part was because Nintendo was also rejecting their core fan base, because their core fan base was dwindling quite significantly. And so they said, look.
And that is technically still true until the Switch.
Yeah.
Every normal Nintendo system trended downwards except for the Wii and the Switch.
Yeah, and so I think where the Switch has succeeded is that they've kind of gotten both. They've said,
Yeah.
let's make a system that is very attractive to the lifestyle and level of gaming ability of your average person. Let's make something
Yeah.
really modular and fun. But let's also make sure that we get games that speak back to a more hardcore audience. So we're bringing
Absolutely.
them along
Yeah.
at the same time that we're bringing a casual audience along. Because one of the big things about the Wii that people forget is that the system sold really well, but that attach rate got lower and lower and lower because
Yeah.
Nintendo
Oh, yeah.
alienated more and more and more of their serious, quote unquote,
Yeah.
serious players.
And
in
the
the audience.
casual audience weren't the ones continuously buying games over the course of an entire system's life cycle. I do think this is very interesting to frame the base work of why the Nintendo Switch feels like a console of dreams. Because, frankly, the people having Nintendo dreams,
Yeah.
I want Nintendo to do this, I want Zelda to be changed in this way. Wouldn't it be so cool if Blank Series went in this direction? Those are the hardcore fan base that the Wii and Wii U largely ended up alienating. And so returning to those design philosophies, as we were saying, with the N64 and GameCube, the Switch is kind of the next step in that evolution of returning to what the most hardcore fans of Nintendo wanted and answering those calls that had been left untouched for largely the Blue Ocean audience, which had gone by I would say before the beginning of the Wii U generation. They were still reaching for that audience, but that audience was no longer interested in purchasing a Nintendo console by that point. And so they realized, okay, so those people are gone. Oh, shit, I think that means we need to go back to the people that started it all.
I mean, the really interesting thing to see is going to be, well, who walks forward with Nintendo? Because ultimately, the Switch is not just successful because it speaks to a hardcore audience. I think there's there was a statistic that came out in all the court hearings about the Activision Blizzard merger with Microsoft, but something like 30% or 35% of PlayStation owners also have a Nintendo Switch or something. It's very clear there's a great adoption there, but there's also obvious that these 65 million people playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe are not 65 million hardcore gamers. So I think that the Switch's position in the ecosystem is interesting in how that it speaks to everybody. But in the context of this conversation, what we're really talking about, and what I think we can kind of reduce this first phase of the discussion down to is that the hard.
God, this is such an interesting topic. I want a whole fucking discussion about who the Switch appeals to and all that.
Yeah.
Goddamn.
The idea that the people
that are swirling.
Yeah, the people that look at the Switch as a system of dreams or a return to form is because Nintendo is finally, quote unquote, returning to those people as a core pillar of their audience again. And that doesn't discount games like Splatoon or things from the Wii U era, which I mean I feel are maybe more creative than anything of the Switch era. And that's where Adam, I want to make it very clear that I'm not acting like Nintendo fans don't want weird and expectation defining titles, because Pikmin, Animal Crossing, Splatoon, keep going down the list, even a lot of the casual Wii software I love, and that Nintendo spark is very special. But I think, as Adam is saying quite nicely, Nintendo is finding a mix here. They're finding a mix between everything we're talking about, the casual and the hardcore audience, a mix between their experimentation and their iteration and everything, and providing a solid level to where Mario Wonder, to his example, and I think this is a great place to transition to the next phase of the conversation, because Mario Wonder is definitely one of these dream games where Mario Wonder is a very casual title by design as a co-op 2D platformer, but also a game that feels like it's talking directly to all the hardcore fans to say, I want Mario to not look like New Super Mario Brothers anymore. And so I think that it's actually a really great encapsulation of everything we're kind of talking about moving into these specific titles.
Yeah. Mario Wonder is one that my mind doesn't immediately jump to, and I think that's primarily because I had not been in the 2D Mario fandom for most of my life until I went back and retroactively played basically all of the games now leading up to Wonder. But it is interesting to think that is maybe one of the longest standing hardcore Nintendo fan wishes. Is Nintendo has been notorious over the course of most of our lifetime with Mario for playing it safe. And, just kind of resting on their laurels and doing the same thing over and over again, whether that's Mario Party or the Mario sports games got more and more safe as those generations and the years have went on. And primarily that's through the New Super Mario Bros. Series that I have played most of. Well, I've played some of all of them, but I've completed the 3 out of 4 of them, and I think they're fine. But Nintendo being special in my mind because it is more than fine and doesn't stick in those areas of repetition is what made me disappointed in those games and not super in love with them. And I am, even though I'm not the biggest fan of 2D Mario, I can feel myself itching for the 2D Mario experience that speaks to me, and Wonder absolutely is that, is leaving behind, since 2006, the exact same aesthetic and concepts that had not been built upon. That is almost 20 years worth of Mario playing it safe and kind of doing the same thing over and over again, and Wonder is building upon those, I think, in very smart ways that speak to those being the most popular Mario games, but returning to the, I would say, Mario 2 and Mario 3 era of creativity, of where an enemy can be whatever the fuck you want, and a power-up can be totally random. And even incorporating some of the weirdness and wackiness that you and I love out of 3D Mario, Mario Wonder is the answer to, again, one of the longest-running hardcore Nintendo fan dreams of just make Mario weird like it used to be, and try something new, and a new art style, and new power-ups, and all this crazy shit that is now being answered. At least we've only seen one trailer of Wonder, but even in the, 2.5 minutes, maybe, it already seems like it's answering those questions in those dreams.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is definitely one of the biggest dream fulfillments of the Switch era for me, because I love 2D Mario. Or I love let me put it this way. Growing up, the new Super Mario Brothers games were some of my favorite games to play. I have such incredibly fond memories, particularly of DS and Wii, but I even played a lot of 2 as well. And you to a lesser extent, but it is hard for me to go back to those games now, because I think that they lack the pizzazz of my favorite 2D Mario games, which are probably Mario 3 and Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, those are probably the 2 weirdest 2D Mario games.
Yeah, and then I absolutely love those games, and so it's super exciting to see Wonder. I don't want to say return to that, because I think that what Wonder exemplifies best is Nintendo's ability to surprise and delight with the 2D Mario I didn't know I wanted. I didn't know I wanted Mario turning into silhouettes like in Donkey Kong, in the retro Donkey Kong games, and stretching his midsection to be like 10 times longer than the stomach should be. And like having Wario Land style transformations and all this stuff. I didn't know I wanted that. And Nintendo's at their best for me when they show me something I didn't know I wanted. So I'm super excited about that, but I actually, Tucker, want to use this as a pivot point into Odyssey, because I think that Odyssey was probably the first indication that the Switch era was going to be a little bit different. Because I think seeing fairly early on that Odyssey was an open world game, or that's not necessarily true, sandbox game.
Open zone.
Open. Yes, it's in the new genre, the open zone genre. I think it was really exciting, more than anything, for what it signaled. This idea that because you could probably make a good case for a return to sandbox Mario being like maybe the number one thing that people were really, really clamoring for in the Wii U era that the system really failed on. Even though I think that 3D World is an exceptional game, it was definitely not what people were hoping for. And so Odyssey, I think, was that first example that maybe things are going to be a little different this time.
Yeah, it's actually interesting when you think about the changes that were made to Mario at the beginning of both let me see if I'm getting right, 7th gen Wii and DS, correct?
Tugger?
7th?
You're right.
Thank you. That 7th gen era is doing the beginning of the 7th gen era was actually in some ways a both answering of dreams. Is Mario doing something totally wacky and completely new with Galaxy in 3D and having a more linear design philosophy than 64 and Sunshine, but being totally fresh and being exciting from that regard. And that's why that's one of the highest rated games of all time. But even New Super Mario Bros. DS being the first new 2D Mario, but literally the first new 2D Mario game in 15 years, a decade or something at that point. It was something crazy like that. And that was an answering of dreams. And both of those made that switch at the same time. And then in similar ways, I think much less so with 3D Mario, but the two of those quote unquote franchises ended up following that same path until I would say the start of the Switch, but also just the end of the Switch as well, because Mario Wonder's even still not out at the time of recording. Taking 3D Mario linear for the greater part of 15 years, from Galaxy to Galaxy 2 to 3D Land to 3D World, and that being certainly something that those are great games and most people love those games, but it wasn't fulfilling the drive that inspired 3D Mario, which is 64 and Sunshine having that open nature and collect fun ability is something that people had wanted since probably Galaxy 2, when they realized that maybe linear 3D Mario was going to be quote unquote the future. And Odyssey was my first step into 3D Mario in the full way that I really experienced that game. But that is a really special example of, and also I think maybe the most explicit example of Nintendo saying, we fucking heard you. They're literally on this stage referencing that there are two styles of 3D Mario, and one of them is the collectathon sandbox nature of 64 and Sunshine, explicitly saying Odyssey is returning to that. We're answering the fucking call, and Odyssey is going to be returning to what you wanted.
Yeah, and I want to bring up another community point here, talking about Mario, because Phil has really been on a roll recently. Let's just take a second.
Isn't he always, though?
Let's just say that Phil's been on a roll.
He said some sus shit, but does that count as being on a roll?
That's what I mean. Phil just has things to say and he says them, and that's why that's why I love talking to Phil about Nintendo stuff. He says two things here. One is so preposterous, I don't even want to address it. I just want to ask for an explanation before I talk to him about it further.
Okay.
However,
whenever this video goes up.
However, the first thing is, he says the most exciting announcement for him. Gotta turn my phone sideways because again, the fucking app is broken. Most exciting announcement: Super Mario 3D All-Stars, and it's a shame that this release is now part of the footnote of artificial scarcity. But playing across two generations of a great franchise was great. And I figured it's just a nice point to insert it into. And it's true. I think that Phil has an unconventional answer, but a really great one, because you want to talk about on-the-nose fan service. I think you got to talk about Mario 3D All-Stars, and I don't even want to fucking get into the whole deleting the game thing. It's not even worth discussing here, I don't think. But the idea of saying, look, we are making you another Mario All-Stars, and we are putting the three games in that you most want, and we're just releasing it out of the blue to celebrate the anniversary. Here you go, you wanted it, you have it. Yeah. That to me is, I think, both emblematic in a good and bad way of what the Switch era has been.
Sure. Yeah.
What do you think about 3D All-Stars?
Elaborate on that?
I'm curious what you think.
Oh, okay. It's interesting because I agree that it was one of the more exciting announcements. Yeah. It was something that had been rumored and that we aggressively thought was not going to be true until the day that it was announced. But it also is, while it sounds fake, and I think that's also something that kind of made me come up with this idea in the first place.
Those menus.
Yeah, the box art and all that. The idea that if you had gone back to someone at the end of the Wii U generation and said, the next Nintendo system is going to have blank, 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 and we'll be talking about a lot of those examples now. We've already talked about a few of them. A new 2D Mario game that isn't in the new Soup series, a 3D Mario game that's returning to the likes of 64 and Sunshine. But I think that if you had told them, we're going to get what Super Mario All-Stars was on the Super Nintendo for 3D Mario games, that would have been the most... Nintendo wouldn't fucking do that. What are you talking about? Like, that's so random. They're going to want to sell them separately. And then they did do it. And it sounds fake. And even the name sounds fake. The name sounds like a too much on the nose answering the fucking calling fake card of fan service.
A fake E3 Direct leak.
Absolutely.
100%.
And that's what this kind of, again, sparks in me, is the idea of fake E3 leaks feeling fake because they fit into, this is answering our thoughts too much. Yeah. Or like, oh, and they're not going to really do that because Nintendo likes to go left when we want to go right. But Nintendo went left when we wanted to go left here. And they just made the game that we thought we wanted. And it was certainly one of the more interesting elements of the Switch generation.
Yeah, so I think it was a really provocative point from Phil. The other thing, and I just want to read the second half of his comment, and Phil, I would love to discuss this with you in the Discord, because I think this is such a fascinating and wild thing to say. I think the next system will, at minimum, be the type of success that the GameCube was. Now, Phil, keep in mind that Nintendo has on record said the GameCube was a failure. Let's just keep that in mind. Let's just begin the conversation there. Maybe it will sell fewer units than Switch 1, but the install base is big enough and the business practices strong enough that they should fund a dozen or so really creative projects that will be remembered fondly after the shift to the next major medium, VR. Now, I just want to... Now, Phil, I would just love to talk with you about how you think that Nintendo's going to tackle VR. That's all I want to say about that. I think it's just a really interesting conversation. Because I have thoughts about that. But I'm obviously not...
Well, that's for a future conversation.
Yeah, I'm not gonna bring it
I
up
would
here.
certainly love to have that.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about some of these comments that we're reading here is they're actually broken down into two responses. As you said, there was a part 1 and part 2. And that's because you, this morning, asked for a part 1 and part 2. Part 1, I think, being where we should focus our efforts now, but then end with responding to some of the part 2 comments, which is that part 1 being, what was the dreams that were answered? Why is this Switch a console of dreams to you? And then, do we think that Nintendo will keep on this console of dreams concept with their next system, or is it even possible? That being where maybe we'll wrap this up here. To jump over to someone else's, I think another one of the most prescient examples of a fake-ass game that is a real thing on Switch is something that our friend Murph says here. He says, the Dream announcement, I like that he capitalized, the Dream announcement, all capital letters at the beginning, was honestly the entire existence of Smash Ultimate. It actually became the kind of game people made fake leaks and character select screens as far back as Brawl. A legendary game we will likely never see again, and if you ask me one thing it's missing, I would say Crash Bandicoot. And now, this is, as I said, I think the prime example of... If you saw the name Smash Ultimate on a end of Wii U era direct leak, you would immediately report that as a spam post.
Man.
And if the idea was, okay, but this leaker, I don't know, maybe very good man, just spitting out there, knows a little bit of information,
heard that
and they're
name
like,
in a while.
And they're like, the game is Smash Ultimate, and it's gonna have Ridley, and K Rool, and Steve, and Sora, and you'd be like, no fucking shot. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
That is the fakest sounding thing that has ever happened. Ultimate? What happened to Melee and Brawl? These names that were about fighting. Ultimate's that's a fucking adjective. What are you talking about? The idea that Smash Ultimate is the culmination of a series in a really specific way, and almost as much so as 3D All-Stars being a response to fan demand, is part of what makes Smash Ultimate one of the most special games of all time, is that it is a very explicit answering of dreams and demands, and in maybe the most explicit way ever, using Smash Ultimate to respond to the Smash Fighter ballot that they set up during the era of Smash 4, and barely had the opportunity to capitalize on there because it was kind of just Bayonetta at the end that came from that ballot, but then that being the kind of the baseline for what Smash Ultimate was going to be is people want K Rool and Ridley, and so we're going to work on them and make it work, and those reveals are going to be amazing and add to Smash history and answer fan outcry, and Smash Ultimate is maybe the game of dreams on the console of dreams.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right. I honestly don't have that much to add. I think you'll.
That's how all these conversations go. That's my dream BLB discussion. I say some shit, and you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, I agree.
I want to raise. Should we raise the big one? I'll raise
Smash
the big one.
Oh,
The big,
Dread.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about Dread. I'm trying to find it because our friend Multiple Birds had the first submission about Dread. Oh right, because Phil immediately after I submitted the prompt started talking about the top 50 list, and then I lost it. Okay, I found a
different topic. Yeah.
I found what Multiple Birds had to say. The announcement of Dread, I think, revitalized my interest in gaming. I was kind of out of the game at the time and didn't even necessarily have a vested interest in Metroid. But the hype around the unexpected announcement of new 2D Metroid, let alone the coveted Dread that people had anticipated only to be frustratingly cancelled, just swept me up in an incredibly unexpected way. I played all the other games leading up to its release and just fell absolutely in love with the gameplay and aesthetics of the series, only then to be blown away by the release of Dread itself, building upon and expanding the
retinue.
I don't know that word, I have to say.
I'll do a little research.
Yeah,
right.
the retinue in Story of Metroid in increasingly satisfying ways. I'll be hard pressed. To me, it feels like a typo.
Retinue is a group of advisors, assistants, or others accompanying an important person.
I would imagine that it might have been a repertoire.
Sure.
And
that's a similarly French-sounding name starting with RE, yeah.
I'll be hard-pressed if any other game captures me like that again, but I guess only the Switch could have done it like it did. I want to also read a comment from our friend Sam, who said, also just talking about Dread, said, the Dread announcement was definitely huge. I think I just had played Super a few months before and was becoming a bigger Metroid fan, so it really came at the perfect time. I remember finding out about the reveal while I was checking Twitter during a break at work, and it felt very hype.
Yeah.
Metroid Dread is 100% the announcement of the generation for me. There's another one that comes close, and I think nobody wrote in about that we should talk about. I just did a 2-hour review of it, but...
Boing!
Metroid Dread, for me, the only time I've ever been disappointed that a video of ours got fucked up is the reaction to Metroid Dread, because I'm running at like a frame every other second. As I'm getting excited for Metroid Dread...
You're running at 0.5 FPS.
I'm getting excited for Metroid Dread, and you're over here fucking making a little checklist for all the things Nintendo's announcing, when I'm literally looking at a game I could never even fathom would actually exist.
Yeah.
And I think that Metroid Dread really, to me, encapsulates so much of what's successful with the generation.
Sure.
Because on one hand, it is fan service. The title Dread is massive fan service. But it's also very, very deliberate fan service, because it's something that Sakamoto, I think partially as marketing speak, to be fair, wanted to pursue for so long, but only now the technology was right. Is that necessarily true? I don't know. However... It was very...
Dread would not be possible for Wii U.
it was very earned, this use of Dread. Yeah. And so there was the fan service, but at the same time, the game is also so extremely, extremely modern. Not in every way. There's a couple particular tiles of the map that David Jaffe and I would differ in our opinion of. But... giving the game to Mercury Steam again and letting them refine everything they did so well in Samus Returns for Dread was Nintendo looking back as much as they needed to, while also striding so far forward. And Metroid Dread just came out, and in my opinion is just an exceptional game. It understands the spirit of Metroid so well, but it also modernizes it and puts a twist on it. A twist that my friend Jonathan Holmes, he describes Dread as like almost like having a Bayonetta style flair to it, and I think that's definitely fair. It's this sort of like empowerment of Samus as a character in a really unique way, while also being true to the atmosphere and lore and everything in the series. I was over the moon when Dread was announced, and then Dread was announced to be out in 4 months, which is another fantastic element of this generation, which has been the by and large commitment to truncated release schedules with precise dates that are announced when they're ready and hit without exception. So I just think from every with rare exceptions, I think that from every perspective, Metroid Dread just encapsulated why this is such an exciting era. And it paid off our longtime love of the series, dropping the Metroid 5 text at the beginning of the trailer.
Of course.
It brought new people into the fold. It wasn't beholden to nostalgia, but informed by it. Equally compelled by the notion of moving things forward. It's just an exceptional game, and I think it's probably my second favorite game on the system.
It's another one of those that they're not going to fucking do this kind of game. Because you think about the way that Metroid had been perceived by the fan base, and frankly, seemingly by Nintendo for, again, the majority of the Wii and Wii U generations, is as that secondary thing that they're going to sometimes experiment with, and most of the games aren't really going to hit. And then you get Samus Returns, and that's really cool and an amazing game. But it's okay. It's a remake. Is this a response to AM2R? What the fuck is going on here? But then Metroid goes silent for a large chunk of the Switch generation is like, oh, well, I guess working with Mercury Steam and having a remake of Metroid, a 2 Metroid game in the modern era, I guess that's probably a fluke.
Yeah.
And then Metroid 5, and then it's 2D, and then it's called Dread, and then it's out in a few months, and then it's as good as it is the perfect way to just like jolt a series back to life.
Yeah.
Is we fucking listened to you. We're going to make a great game that you didn't expect would happen, and it's going to have that extra twist on top that it is literally answering a call for that had been around for decades to continue that 2D Metroid story and build on what came before, because Fusion had come out such a long time ago. It's like, well, I guess it's just dead at this point. I mean, we'd had Metroid games, but Metroid in the way that the hardcore fans loved it had been dead for a very, very long time, and Dread absolutely revised that, and now we're getting rumors and constantly talking about they're probably working on another one, which means that Metroid is back, and that also, I think, pairs very nicely with the announcement of Metroid Prime 4.
Yeah.
The exact opposite of what you were just talking about with truncated release schedule, but another one of those things that is, I would say, even though it's not something that like personally got me super excited in the moment, I think it might be the most excited I've seen people be on the internet, is the announcement of Metroid Prime 4, which is interesting because that is a series that had been dead for a shorter amount of time than 2D Metroid had, and it being a direct continuation, but it still was so early in the Switch's life cycle and dropped so out of nowhere, and Retro Studios have been quiet for a long time at that point, and now it's been even longer. The idea that Metroid Prime 4 and Metroid Dread, two direct continuations of hardcore franchises, are part of this generation, absolutely add to, holy shit, I can't believe Nintendo is doing this. This sounds fucking fake and ridiculous, and I mean, presuming that Prime 4 comes out and is great, are some of the best games Nintendo has ever made, and are answering that question and that dream in that is very, very specific way. Metroid is maybe at its best moment right now. Yeah, or at least in a long, long time.
And even Prime Remastered, just out of nowhere.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And just,
in 1 day. In 0 days.
Just it being done for over a year, and Nintendo just saying, okay, today you can have it. Very, 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 very special. Let's take it somewhere else. Where do you want to take it next?
Let's read. I think we're actually running out of responses here.
We got a couple more. I've got one on the tip of me nose here. If you want me to read it out.
Okay.
This comes from Gravity, who's talking about something just a little bit different.
Oh, I missed that one.
In terms of both exciting and unexpected, I'd have to go with Pokemon Legends Arceus. We know that they were eventually going to do remakes Diamond and Pearl, but never expected them to not only do a sort of, quote, origin story game, but also basically have them treat this as the, quote unquote, new era of Pokemon. And boy, was that game a joy to run through. Yeah, this is a very interesting one, because obviously it's a little bit different in that the Pokemon Company basically has full autonomy to do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah.
And talk about Pokemon Cafe remix till the cows come home. Or until the milk tanks come home. But Legends Arceus, even though I am not the biggest fan of the game, I think it's a good game. There's no doubt that the way I was talking about it before release was just, I was just so fucking excited for the game. And I'm pleased to be in the minority on how Legends Arceus turned out, because even though this isn't Nintendo per se, there's no doubt that even including Scarlet and Violet, Pokemon has had perhaps the most staggering. I hesitate to call it wish fulfillment, because I don't think Legends Arceus could have been anticipated by anybody, but Scarlet and Violet was definitely more in line with receiving or giving what we've been hoping to receive.
Yeah. So what's interesting about the pairing of the three big games so I would say every mainline Pokemon game on Switch, and almost every Pokemon game on Switch, is a kind of in some way each one has an answer to a dream. They are not all of these ideas in one that make them the ultimate Pokemon game that, like, frankly, we're still wishing for right now, but they each answer a specific dream in different ways. The idea of a co-op Pokemon game with following Pokemon and ride Pokemon in Let's Go. Back in Kanto is absolutely, all of those are elements that for the entirety of the 3DS generation, people will be like, oh, where's the fucking following Pokemon? Like, man, let's just co-op is actually something that like I think people had never really thought Pokemon would have, but it is, I guess, an idea in the back of my mind, like, no, they'll never do that, and they did. And then you get Sword and Shield, that is, I would say, out of the 4 mainline games, the least wish fulfillment game, but is taking that step towards. Oh, well, also, in Let's Go, Pokemon in the Overworld. I mean, the amount of specific things that game like took steps forward to, holy shit, they're really trying something new, is quite immense. And then Sword and Shield having open world, let's put that in heavy air quotes, but emphasizing scale and having a partially non-linear structure and exploring the open area, that's something that Pokemon had never done before. And watching sweeping vista shots in a Pokemon game when Pokemon had been corridors for its entire existence up to that point, that was absolutely a wish fulfillment.
What was that place called, that big open area?
The Wild Area.
Wild Area, that's what it was, yeah.
Yes, the Wild Area. Yeah, and then I think you're right, actually, with Legends Arceus being something that maybe being the most prescient example, specifically within Pokemon, of Nintendo doing something that people never knew they wanted, but turns out they really wanted it, is placing an action focus on Pokemon and having this collecting aspect that had never been focused on before, and returning to a region in a very unique way, ostensibly being a totally new kind of remake. I guess they also did that with Let's Go, but Legends being that, of course, with Scarlet and Violet being that open world co-op experience that was the dream Pokemon game, and of course is marred in certain ways, but fulfills that in other ways. It's very interesting that Pokemon Company and Game Freak have been able to answer almost every dream question that people have had over the course of this generation, when Pokemon had been at its maybe least popular with hardcore fans in the 3DS era. Of course, it was still doing fine sales-wise, but you hear from most old-head Pokemon fans that the 3DS era Pokemon games, and though I disagree, are the worst ones, and they're run out of ideas, and then they completely subverted that. And actually, we have a very long conversation of that to exactly that effect with Bo from before Scarlet and Violet came out. Right. But Pokemon has been explicitly listening to fans and answering dreams over the course of this entire generation. It's just funny that they split those dreams into 4 different games released over the course of 6-7 years.
Yeah. My next dream is for Ilka to remake Black and White.
No, wait. But also, even
that, I think, counts.
Yeah, well, even Gen 4 remakes. I mean, Gen 4 remakes are like, oh, fuck, can't wait for Gen 4 remakes. Gen 4 is the fucking best. Oh, my God. And then we have Gen 4 remakes. They happened. I prefer to not remember that they happened, but it was certainly a dream that was answered here on the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, it's one.
Sorry, BDST kind of deflated me. I had to remember that it happened.
It's like, Mom, can we get Gen 4 remakes? We have no way of Gen 4 remakes at home, but it's just BDSP that's at home.
Yeah.
I've got another comment here from Abby we can talk about. I think this is a really interesting answer. My most unexpected would have to be Splatoon 3. I don't remember seeing any leaks, and I was just getting into Splatoon and was on the verge of buying 2. However, the trailer and the huge reveal were super exciting, not to mention it was during a very boring week-long snowstorm here in Texas.
Yeah.
What do you think about this answer? I think this is a very interesting answer.
It's interesting because this is, I think, where Nintendo's current design philosophy of building upon what works is at its most obvious.
Yeah.
Splatoon 3 is the direct continuation of Splatoon and Splatoon 2. That Splatoon was to Splatoon 1. No, Splatoon 2 was to Splatoon 1. But it also is the kind of thing that Nintendo doesn't usually do multiple games per system with their biggest franchises. And was it really necessary? And does it splinter the fan base or whatever? Like, you can throw a lot of weird questions at Splatoon 3's existence. But for me, seeing Nintendo take this route with one of their big franchises is not dream fulfillment, because Splatoon 3 was kind of a foregone conclusion, and we could have probably imagined it would be exactly what Splatoon 3 ended up being if we were guessing, a couple months after Splatoon 2 came out. But it still is something that is very interesting for Nintendo and for you and me and the big Splatoon fans that we are. Splatoon 3 absolutely being a massive surprise, and the fact that it wasn't leaked and that it was as amazing as it was, it is a very interesting kind of thing. But I would say it's not a dream fulfillment in the way that I think I could throw at so many of the biggest games on Switch. Splatoon 3 is of course that was going to happen, but it was only surprising because of how soon it happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Splatoon 3 is the best Splatoon game. I also think that it's definitely the least exciting. I think an interesting component of this discussion about dreams is that to answer fans' dreams, you have to think a little bit more business-minded. I think part of what was interesting about the Wii era is that Nintendo was not listening to anybody. Yeah. In a traditional sense. They were listening to an audience that didn't know they were being listened to. I think to get to Splatoon 3, you have to make a series of very calculated business decisions. Splatoon is a big seller. People love Splatoon. Let's give people more Splatoon because we have probably sort of tracked it out and this many people will buy Splatoon if we make another one. Yeah. And I think that's fine. I think it's fine that Nintendo does that. I don't think it's as exciting. I don't think that Splatoon 3, I still think to this day, Splatoon 3, even though it's best through polish, I think that it's yet to really show us what's so special about it. Yeah, its own identity. Yeah, and I don't think it's impossible to do that. I mean, it took Splatoon 2 a while, in my opinion.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, Splatoon 3 is an interesting one because I love it. I absolutely love the game, but it doesn't exemplify anything Nintendo does at its best. In some ways, it actually kind of exemplifies what they're doing that's least interesting to me, which is saying, that we have a lane and we're going to stay in the lane with this game. Yeah. So it's a toss-up because I think that this really strategy makes sense for what Splatoon is, which is basically just a competitive shooter. But I also think in some ways it loses a little bit of the pizzazz of some of the other games we're talking about.
Sure. No, absolutely, and that's very interesting because I think it's an outlier. Yeah. When you think about it from that regard, because even if in retrospect it's kind of obvious and like, okay, yeah, they're just following what fans want in like a very like kind of neutral way of like, making a sandbox Mario. Like that wasn't impossible to do, but it certainly was exciting. That applies to most Switch games, but Splatoon 3 is just like making another great game in a great series with some more polish. And it makes it an amazing game and one of my favorite games of all time. But I would go as far to say as it's one of the least exciting games on Switch, even though I was excited for it. Like conceptually, it's one of the least exciting.
It just fits a very interesting space because like that campaign is probably the best in the series, and the lobbies are the most refined and everything. But when you're getting to the point where the game is so great because the lobby system is better, I think that it's not quite doing what Odyssey did, which is say, hey, what do fans want back? They want explorative 3D Mario. How can we give them that, but how can we also surprise them? I don't think Splatoon 3, other than about an hour and a half of the campaign, ever surprised me. Not that I need to be surprised to love a game.
Of course, yeah.
I kind of feel that way about Tears of the Kingdom, but I just think it's an interesting piece here.
What's interesting about that though is Splatoon being Nintendo's quote-unquote newest series, and certainly the newest one that has of any repute and continued success, it's had no opportunity ever to build dreams. There's never been the Splatoon 1 is awesome, but then Splatoon 2 is a totally different kind of game or approach to this gameplay formula, so then I want them to return to what Splatoon 1 did. They've only built upwards on this same pillar, as opposed to, I would say, every one of their other franchises building multiple pillars where they can hop back in between, and suddenly the breadth of a series and the potential of their concepts can be expanded. Splatoon has never had that opportunity because it's been 3 games within the course of 8 years, and they're all great, but they all do the same thing. Yeah. Or, largely do the same thing, conceptually do the same thing. And I think that for me, and I don't even know really if Splatoon fans want this or if Nintendo thinks that Splatoon fans want this, but I want Splatoon to enter that same sphere as other Nintendo franchises, is add a new Splatoon mainline game or spinoff or something that does something completely different with the world of Splatoon, that now adds something to the possibility of what Splatoon can be. And I don't know if that will happen, but I think it's certainly possible. And that is my Splatoon dream game, is doing something different with Splatoon, because they've done a phenomenal trilogy, one of the best trilogies they've ever done, but also one of the safest trilogies they've ever done.
Exactly. I wanna just I was just doing a little bit of a check to make sure we're not missing anybody. There's one more comment.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is, speaking of trilogies, technically there's 4 games in this series, core games. But The Shamans has a very, very short submission, but I think one that you'll want to talk about. Shaman simply says, Xenoblade 3 existing as soon as it did was amazing.
I agree that it is, because it's a great game and it brings Xenoblade to a higher level of prominence and critical acclaim than it ever have been. But I think actually Xenoblade, and by some extension Monolith Soft, fall into the same camp of, especially now through the course of the Switch generation that we were talking about with Splatoon 3, of Monolith Soft is going to make an amazingly quality game that pushes the system to its furthest and has an amazing story and does things that other Nintendo developers aren't doing. And they're going to do that frequently. That is what we expect from them. I mean, if Monolith Soft stopped and took 6 years to make a game and we didn't hear anything from them, that would be something different from Monolith Soft. Now, I'm not saying I want that from Monolith Soft, because Monolith Soft, being the Nintendo in-house workhorse and making the high-quality, gigantic games that they do at the clip that they do, is what they're great at. And Splatoon 3, Xenoblade 3 is one of the biggest examples of that. But it also makes sense if you pay attention to Monolith Soft. They're making ports, they're helping everyone else out, they're making Xenoblade 2, and they've got the engine for that, so they're going to make Definitive Edition, and then sure, make a 3. But so I agree that it's a dream fulfillment in some way, in that Monolith Soft is now one of Nintendo's most important developers. Xenoblade is a now surprisingly prolific franchise in a way that I had never had a chance to be before the Switch's generation, with multiple entries on the system, all being highly acclaimed. But in some way, it is also exactly what you would expect to happen from Monolith Soft. But it, again, kind of going back to what Splatoon 3, where we're talking about Splatoon 3, it's not a bad thing that it's not a surprise that Xenoblade 3 came out as quickly as it did and it was amazing as it was. It is a great game from a great developer in a great series that came out. It's just interesting that Monolith Soft doesn't have that wish fulfillment anymore, because they're just, we know what to expect from them, but it's always something amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the better example in the conversation is Xenoblade 2, because
sure.
I mean the narrative around Xenoblade 1 with the whole Operation Rainfall movement to even get it localized is quite in and of itself a very exceptional story that people should go read more about if they're not that familiar with it.
That's one of the biggest Nintendo wish moments of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, might not be surpassed until Mother 3 ends up releasing.
Yeah, that and The Last Story and Pandora's Tower, 3 games that people all remember with equal reverence, I think.
Absolutely.
There's an alternate universe where Pandora's Tower 3 has just come out.
Do you think they would have made Pandora's Tower X on the Wii U?
I think they would have tried.
Yeah.
But Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was I think no doubt a very big deal. The sort of percolation that what are they doing? Where is Monolith Soft? They come back after X, which is a great game, but X is not a sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles. They say, big dick swinging, here's Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and brother, it's out this year. And then what was everybody saying? The game was getting delayed. The game was getting delayed. The game came out, and to a lot of people, it was great. So I think that Monolith Soft, I think you're right. I think you're right that they inhabit both spaces. They, on one half, they have their role. They're support on Nintendo's biggest games. They are given sort of free reign, either in exchange or because the games are sustainable on their own merit, the space to make whatever RPG they want. And we do know that they are working on some sort of big fantasy new IP thing. It's going to
be a big goddamn deal.
Yeah, very little known about it, and I think that is going to be the moment that maybe Xenoblade 3 wasn't. Even though Xenoblade 3 was so good that even I had fun with it for about 10 hours.
Yeah.
So
and that it also Xenoblade 3 got Xenoblade nominated for Game of the Year. And I think that's actually something that's an interesting general thing about the Switch is I feel like it balanced out Nintendo's IPs in a very interesting way of having a lot of them reach levels of sales potential and critical acclaim that the series had never reached before. Animal Crossing New Horizons outsold. I actually have this here. This is one of those fake ass things that you go back and you're like, no fucking shot, this is going to happen. But the idea that an Animal Crossing game sells more than every Pokemon, mainline Mario, and mainline Zelda game. What the fuck? You fucking get that shot that's going to happen. But then it did, and so now Animal Crossing, because of the Switch, is bigger than it ever has been. And that's not like a dream that ever happened, but it is something that sounds fake when you really think about like the trajectory of Animal Crossing and the popularity of Nintendo's brands, bringing Animal Crossing up to complete parity, if not higher parity, than their other classic long-running franchises, is now adds that to that pool of S-tier Nintendo franchises. Even things like, as I was saying, Xenoblade being nominated for Game of the Year. Now Xenoblade is at a higher level of popularity and critical acclaim than it ever has been. I think that I really like that Nintendo has pushed so many of their series on a similar level that has led to a greater across-the-board amount of critical acclaim, sales potential, fan appreciation, rather than there being, though there still are, like super, super distinct tiers of, oh my god, there's the microscopic ones that no one gives a fuck about, like, I don't know, Mother and F-Zero or whatever, and then at the top, it's like, okay, they've got the biggest stuff. Don't cry. I'm sorry, I'm spitting facts. Maybe I got spit in your eye and that's why you're crying.
Yeah. No, I would be smiling.
But I think that's a really interesting element of this Switch, is sort of balancing out their stable of IP in a sort of cross-board way.
Yeah, I mean, it also just, it's a testament to the fact that, like, New Leaf was a mega release, but even New Leaf just wasn't right place, right time for that game. I mean, what New Horizons is, having a conversation with my friend about this recently, any Animal Crossing game that released in March 2020 was going to be as big as New Horizons was.
Yeah.
But it's, regardless of why it happened, what happened is important. And what happened is that Animal Crossing gained the status that I think it was always trying for, but never quite got. That's all the submissions for this whole part one ordeal. There's two other games that have not been talked about by anybody that I want to quickly bring up.
Great. Go ahead.
The first is obviously Pikmin 4. I mean, we have fucking belabored the Pikmin point as of late, so I don't think we need to really do that again. 2-hour review you should go check out, talking about why that game is so exceptional. The other one is Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is a remarkable game, and I think it falls into the Dread camp for me, and the Pikmin camp, but I think Dread is a little bit more of a direct analog of giving us what we wanted based on what we never had. I mean, there are so many GameCube prototypes for Kirby games and 3D or otherwise that didn't come to fruition until this. And similar to Dread, I think there's a little bit of truth and a little bit of fiction to how much of the old prototype and old ideation ended up with the new game. But again, the fact of the matter is, it was an analysis of where Kirby was and where Kirby needed to be and where people always wanted Kirby to be. And going there, but going there not in Dreamland, and going there with these new concepts that inform level design, like mouthful mode and various things. So that is another, to me, there's a holy trinity of Switch games. It's Metroid Dread, Pikmin 4, and Kirby and the Forgotten Land. For me, that's my holy trinity.
That totally makes sense.
And I think that because they all just sort of point toward this idea of giving us what we want, but not just what we want, more than what we want, and different than what we maybe thought we wanted, but parallel enough that it is nonetheless the different but recognizable picture of a dream. And I think that that's what those games are at their best.
No, definitely. And those two are actually, I would say, alongside Smash Ultimate. I think my trinity is Smash Ultimate, Pikmin 4, and Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and that's very interesting because if you'd asked me 2 years ago, well, actually, no, Forgotten Land came out, like a year and a half ago. Okay, so you'd asked me 2 years ago, before Kirby and the Forgotten Land was announced, I would have said, I've played some Kirby games, not a big fan. I haven't played any Pikmin games, but I'm sure, announcing these games would be exciting. But what I didn't realize. Actually, let me rephrase it. I don't know why I fucking said any of that.
That's all right.
Reverse it.
I forgot.
I do a little Wonka impression there. But so starting with Pikmin 4, Pikmin 4 falls in that same camp of something like Metroid Dread or Mario Wonder that are games specifically answering long term wants. I mean, Pikmin 4 one of the notoriously longest development games ever, and especially from Nintendo, and now of course Dread Prime 4 is in the same camp as well. But the idea that Pikmin 4 is real and it's coming out soon and it's reinventing the franchise in different ways for the first time, and it's trying to speak to a different audience, and they're pushing it on a popular piece of hardware with actual good marketing for the first time in the franchise, and then being as amazing as it was, two of our favorite games of the year, of all time, whatever metric you want to throw at it, that to me was only as exciting as it was, because unlike Dread and unlike Prime 4, I was able to have a personal moment with the reveal of that game, because I'd played the three mainline Pikmin games before that. I'd never played a Metroid game before Dread came out, so I knew it was exciting for other people, but I didn't have that touchstone. And so when Pikmin 4, they bring up Bloom, and we're like, no, fucking John, don't fuck with me. And then they're like, Pikmin 4 is real, here, the little goddamn thing, and we're both losing our shit. I'm able to have that connection to that game being an amazing hype moment that Dread was conceptually to me, but not personally. And the interesting thing about Forgotten Land / 3D Kirby is that that's actually my most dream release of this system.
Yeah.
Is I have always, let's use my words carefully, appreciated Kirby on a conceptual level.
But you don't like Kirby, and that makes your like of this game so much more interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Because I've always played Kirby games and thought they were interesting conceptually, but as I've gone on many limbs, I think you build a whole fucking tree at this point. I would say personally poorly designed, but the idea was there of copy abilities and the exploration and fun little enemies and Kirby being cute and the aesthetic being interesting. And to me, I was always like, can you imagine exploring an environment and being able, like a 3D environment that is well realized and has obstacles, and you can get a copy ability and use that in combat in different ways in this like richly realized world. That was like always for me one of like my three most anticipated like dream games ever. It was that, Portal 3. I don't even fucking know. Like I had a couple games listed. 3D Kirby, Minecraft 2. No. But 3D Kirby was always that they're never going to do this because they've apparently found something they like to do, and they've done it for forever. So why the fuck are they going to make a 3D Kirby game? And then they did. And that was also something that was not rumored at all. I mean, it like was by like 30 minutes or whatever before that direct. But the fact that HAL just worked on a 3D Kirby game in the background and put it out, and it's one of the best Kirby games ever made, and pushed Kirby to a higher sales potential and critical acclaim than it ever had been before, that is like a dream realization for me. And feels like it might be the next direction for Kirby. It reinvented it in that way. So Pikmin 4 and Kirby and the Forgotten Land are absolutely some of those. I can't believe they're doing this, and it turned out as well as it did, basically in the exact way, especially I personally would have wanted, with some of the more divisive concepts of Pikmin 4 speaking to me more than others. But those two games are just fucking god tier in terms of I can't fucking believe this.
Tucker, I want to take a survey of the field of the response to the second part of the question, but I frankly, I'm tired. Yeah, the community's wore me out. Also, this could be another discussion. So the community's wore me out. What I want to do is I want to. I think. Tucker,
well, actually, hold on. Can I do one more thing?
Yeah.
Because I wrote a big list. And I copied and pasted this.
Yeah, of course.
One more thing. Yes. Though that would be at the end. This is like a really shitty one more thing. That's like 5/6 of the way through the direct. But I did make a gigantic list of when I was trying to come up with my sort of bullet points of what fits into this console of dreams. And there are varying degrees of dreams. I think something like Metroid Dread or Pikmin 4 being on certainly the upper end, but there being certainly things that were answers to fan cries from the Wii and Wii U eras that we still haven't touched on yet. Very simple things that were in some ways disappointments with Wii U games that were answered to different varying degrees of success with Switch games. Things like Mario Maker. Be like the first immediate thing, be like, it has fucking slopes. We know you want fucking slopes. Here's the fucking slopes. Yeah. And then, of course, taking a little while, but world maker. Like you can make worlds in Super Mario Maker 2, and that is something that was one of the biggest requests for Mario Maker, and that dream was fully answered. Or something like Mario Kart. Mario Kart 8, Wii U, great game, one of the best-selling games on that system, widely beloved, but it has some things that people are wondering about. Where's the fucking battle mode? First things first, fuck you, battle mode. Here you go. Have some extra characters, have some crossover stuff, adding the fucking Inklings, and now 50 DLC tracks. And it's fucking huge, and it's basically Mario Kart Ultimate. 8 Deluxe, especially with that Booster Course pass, is absolutely a dream Mario Kart game. Yeah. That if you told someone, a year before the Switch came out, that this was going to be what the Switch's Mario Kart game was, is that it had 100 tracks, it had Inklings in it, it had a great battle mode and 2 item boxes. People went, no fucking shot. You fucking kidding me? That's fucking crazy. And then it was. And even small things, like Advance Wars is back.
Yeah.
Famicom Detective Club games got fucking remade. What are you fucking talking about? This is gonna fucking happen? No More Heroes 3 happened. They brought that fucking series back. That's crazy. And Super Mario RPG Remake.
Yeah, No More Heroes got 2 games.
It's true. Yeah. It did. It's the most prolific now it has been in a decade. Or 15 years, whatever. And then the final one, and I didn't really organize these by like most exciting, but new Pokemon Snap is absolutely one of those dream games. No fucking shot they're ever going to do that.
Yeah.
It's been since the N64. They did it one time. Why the fuck would they make another one? We'd love them to. We'd love it to be fully realized with all these big maps. And, oh god, they did it. They made new Pokemon Snap, and it's just all these small things that aren't the top tier of sandbox 3D Mario and open world Zelda and Mario Kart with bazillion tracks and a good battle mode. These are the biggest things, Dread and Pikmin and all that. But I think it percolates down to most of the games on the Switch, which is why I purport that the Nintendo Switch is the console of dreams. All of these ideas on all these scales from all these franchises specifically answering fan cries and fan dreams that, as someone fully invested in listening to speculation and discussion around Nintendo, each of these had been a giant topic of discussion. Well, maybe not Famicom Detective, but different degrees of Nintendo. I really want Nintendo to do this. And what makes this last part so interesting, and the potential of this being a larger conversation on its own, is that they've kind of answered all the questions.
Yeah.
I mean, they can flip-flop back and make more casual software because they haven't focused on that in a while, or make a linear 3D Mario because they haven't done that in a while, or 2D Zelda. There are certainly things they can flip-flop back to that are what fans are outcrying for now, but so many of the long-running Nintendo rumors, dreams, hopes, oh my god, I want them to do this, have been answered on the Switch, and certainly way more than any previous system. And so it'll be really interesting to see what strings they're able to pull on for this next system. And those are the kind of games that we're going to be hoping for and looking for, that makes this next system so exciting, because we don't know what we want anymore necessarily, except for maybe continue on the same track, make an Odyssey 2, I don't know, fucking make Mario Kart 9. Like, we expect these things, but where do you fall on this? Can they continue this into the next system?
Tucker, I'm going to make an executive decision.
Yeah,
I'm going to cliffhang it.
Oh, part 2.
Because
this is fucking Doom moment.
I was looking at these comments. I think there's a lot of good stuff in here. And Tucker, I think what we've done here is we've primed the pump for this conversation about what's next. And I think it's a much larger conversation to have, so I think we should have it separately. Because I have to say, Tucker, I have a lot to say about this, and I have a lot to say about what other people have to say. And frankly, they don't. Honestly, I don't think the audience deserves more BLB today.
Sure, you know what? Totally fair.
Totally fair. Guys, I just don't think you do. I'm sorry.
Be better. You'll get more in the future if you're better.
We can't give you everything you want. Fuck.